Good morning and welcome to another edition of Toolbox Tuesday with the SCSA. I am your host, Kara, Safety Advisor out of the Saskatoon office. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to be discussing fire extinguishers, awareness, and prevention. First and foremost, if after this webinar you still have questions or concerns surrounding fire safety, you can check out the Occupational Health and Safety Act and Regulations. Under the regulations, Part 25 will be fire and explosion hazards, which we're going to cover in this webinar. Just not all of them. The regulations will be numbered 359 through 374. If you have any questions, you can look there. Also, please download our app, SCSA Guide to OH&S Legislation. You can use keyword searches within the app to look up certain keywords that you want to know about. Also, please check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Follow our YouTube channel where we post our webinars and weekly toolbox talks. Lots of good information there for you, your workers, and your company. So as I said, we're going to be discussing fire extinguishers, awareness, and prevention today. And as I also mentioned, Part 25 covers fire and explosion hazards. So the interpretation part of the regulations at the beginning of each part is just some definitions of some words that are going to be used throughout. So I'll go through a few of these just so when they come up a little bit later, we're all familiar with what they are. So combustible liquid means a liquid that has a flash point above 37.8 degrees Celsius, below 93.3. Container obviously means a stationary or portable vessel that is used to contain a flammable substance and includes a tank, tank car, tank truck, and a cylinder. A flammable liquid means a liquid that has a flash point below 37.8 degrees Celsius and has a vapor pressure not exceeding 275.8 kilopascals at 37.8 degrees Celsius. That's all very fancy. Again, we'll go over where you can look for this information, but that should be in the SDS for any materials or substances that you're using on site. Hot work means work that produces arcs, sparks, flames, heat, or other sources of ignition. System means a system into which compressed or liquefied gases are delivered and stored, and from which the compressed or liquefied gas is discharged in the liquid or gaseous form, and includes containers, pressure regulators, pressure relief devices, manifolds, interconnecting piping, and controls. So those are some of the definitions that are going to be used throughout Part 25, the next regulations that we're going to go over here that pertain to fire safety. So I mentioned the regulations 359 through 374 cover fire safety. So 359 was those interpretations or definitions. 360 talks about the fire plan. So OH&S regulations or legislation is very specific about what needs to be included in your fire safety plan. We'll go over that now. So 360 Part 1, an employer, contractor, or owner shall take all reasonably practicable steps. Now, if you've taken any training through the SCSA, we use those words very often. So take all reasonably practicable steps to prevent the outbreak of fire at a place of employment and to provide effective means to protect workers from any fire that may occur. So that is part of the owner, contractor, or employer's responsibilities. They will also develop and implement a written fire safety plan that provides for the safety of all workers in the event of a fire. Part 2 is going to go over what we need. So the plan developed pursuant to subsection 1 must include the emergency procedures to be used in case of a fire, including sounding of the fire alarm, notifying the fire department, and evacuating any endangered workers with special provisions for workers with disabilities. So that all needs to be included in your plan. We also need to include the quantities, locations, and storage methods of all flammable substances present at the place of employment. So what do you have on site that's flammable? How are you storing it, etc.? Where is it located? C, the designation of persons to carry out the fire safety plan and the duties of the designated persons. The training of the designated persons and workers in their responsibility for fire safety. The holding of fire drills, and the control of fire hazards. Now, when we're doing our hazard assessments on site, we should see any hazards, anything that could be a hazard, and we want to control those. Secondary to that, we need to have included in our fire safety plan those specific fire hazards and how we are controlling those. So Subsection 3 says an employer, contractor, or owner shall ensure that the designated persons and workers who have been assigned fire safety duties are adequately trained in and implement the fire safety plan. So it's the employer's responsibility to make sure that the employees that have been assigned fire safety duties are adequately trained and make sure that they themselves are implementing the program. The fire safety plan is posted in a conspicuous place for reference by workers, so we want to make sure that it's available to everybody. And then C, a fire drill is held at least once during every 12-month period. So at a minimum, we have to do a fire drill once a year. So to summarize and put this in layman's terms, what do we need on our fire safety plan? 1, we need a way to alert all of the workers that there is a fire on site. So everybody needs to be able to hear that, whether it's a system that's hardwired into a building, whether it's an air horn system, whatever is going to work for you, as long as all of the employees are alerted that there is a fire in case of a fire on site. 2, a means to contact emergency services. So do you have, again, a hard system for phones wired into the building? Is there someone on site that is allowed to have a cell phone, etc.? It's a good thing to have a backup in case someone is injured during a fire or explosion or incident. If the person who is normally supposed to call emergency services is down, we want to make sure that we have that backup. 3, a way to get everyone out, including those who may be disabled in some way. Again, we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to get out. Have somebody that is going to do a roll call. Have somebody that's going to come out last and check doors, etc. 4, a list of the flammable substances at the job site. So again, what do you have? Where is it? How are you storing it? Are you storing it near anything that could be a fire hazard? Are you storing it near any hot work, etc.? We want to make sure that we keep those 2 things as separate as possible. 5, the duties and responsibilities of those trained in the plan along with their training. So how are these people trained? What are their responsibilities in the event of an emergency? That all has to be laid out in our fire safety plan. 6, the holding of fire drills. So again, we have to have that drill a minimum of once per year. Make sure that you plan it for the work that you're doing, the substances that you have on site, anything that pertains to your line of work. If you need to do more than 1 a year, that's fine. Legislation says we need to do at least 1 a year. So anything over and above that you want to do that is fine. Anything less than that is not okay. And then the control of fire hazards. So again, do we have hot work going on? Do we have flammable substances? Do we have hot work near flammable substances? How are we going to control that fire hazard? That all needs to be included in our plan. If this is seeming very overwhelming for you, again, call an SCSA Safety Advisor. We would be more than happy to help you put this plan together. So next we're going to talk about fire extinguishers. This is covered under section 361 of the regulations, which we'll go over first, and then we will cover proper usage of a fire extinguisher. So 361 subsection 1 says an employer, contractor, or owner shall ensure that portable fire extinguishers are selected, located, inspected, maintained, and tested so that the health and safety of workers at the place of employment is protected. So it is the owner, contractor, or employer's job to make sure that the proper firefighting equipment is on site and ready to be used by the workers. It is maintained, it is kept in good working order, etc. Subsection 2 says an employer, contractor, or owner shall ensure that portable fire extinguishers are placed not more than 9 meters away from A, each industrial open flame portable heating device, tar pot, or asphalt kettle that is in use, and B, each welding or cutting operation that is in progress. So if we have any hot work going on at all, it is imperative that we are prepared for a fire around those areas. We want to make sure that if a fire does break out due to any of the above noted items, that we are ready for it. When we talk about using a fire extinguisher, the most important point to note is if the fire is large or out of control, don't try to extinguish it, just get out. It is also very important for you to know that where all of your potential exits are, and don't let the fire get between you and the door. So if the fire is small and extinguishable, we want to remember the acronym PASS, P-A-S-S, which is pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. So pull the pin. Every fire extinguisher will come with a safety pin that is in the handle to avoid accidental discharge. Pull this pin out first. Next is aim. We want to aim low at the base of the fire. aim over top of the flames. We're not actually extinguishing anything. We're just pushing the flame down while that chemical is going over top of the fire. So we want to aim nice and low at the base of the fire where the ignition source is actually happening. Squeeze. We want to squeeze the trigger to release the chemical and extinguish the fire when you have aimed at the base. Sweep. So sweep the nozzle from side to side, ensuring that you're hitting the source of the fire to extinguish the flames. So, what do I need for fire extinguishers? Now, how many and what class and size of fire extinguisher that you need is going to depend on the work that you're doing, the materials that you're using, the substances that are on site, etc. What are the fire hazards at the facility? Are they regular combustibles like wood, cloth, paper, things like that? Or are they electrical in nature? Are they oil or grease based fires that you would potentially be looking at? Or metal? There's lots of different types of fire extinguishers for different kind of combustibles that you're working with. Section 362 of the regulation talks about garbage as a fire hazard. So where garbage that may constitute a fire hazard is present at the place of employment, an employer, contractor, or owner shall provide covered receptacles for the garbage that are suitable to the nature of the hazard. So again, what are the materials that you're using on site? We need to do a proper hazard assessment of the work site and the materials that we're using. Again, your fire hazards and controls should be included in your fire safety plan, but we want to make sure that we're doing those regular hazard assessments so that if there is garbage and maybe we have somebody doing some grinding over by the trash can, that we're going to make sure that that's covered. That's something that we can identify early on in our hazard assessment, make sure that we put a control into place, etc. Training of workers. So designated fire captains or personnel should be trained in the duties that they need to carry out in the event of an emergency, whether it's a fire, a rescue, an incident causing injury or property damage. It is best that everyone is aware of their responsibilities before that emergency comes to light. We want to make sure that everybody is aware, what are you going to do in the event of an emergency? That way we don't have 8 people calling 911. We don't have nobody calling 911. We don't have people running around like chickens with their heads cut off. We have everybody moving calmly and to the muster point where they need to go. So this can be done with the use of scheduled and or unscheduled fire and emergency drills. As stated in legislation, these drills need to be held a minimum of once per calendar year. But again, your policy should state a frequency that is right for your company and the work that you are doing. So make sure that you include that in your fire safety plan. You want to include that in your safety manual so everyone is aware of how many drills you're doing per year, not necessarily the day that they're being done, because we want to make sure that everybody is on their toes and maybe not preparing for that fire drill, but ready and aware of their duties. Train all your workers as well, not just your fire captains. So you should have in place a safe job procedure for the use of fire extinguishers. Review that at a toolbox or safety meeting with the workers, so everyone is aware of how to use a fire extinguisher properly in the event of an emergency. Safety data sheets. So anyone who takes WHMIS, who is anyone who is working in this province, needs to have WHMIS training. We'll know that our safety data sheets have all the information that we need for any substance or chemical that we're using at the place of employment. So these sheets have all the information that you need about a product, from the PPE that you should be wearing while you're using it, relocating it, storing it, maybe moving it from one container to another, any first aid measures that you may need, and then proper firefighting measures, which are always going to be included in Section 5 of your SDS. Now that we have the globally harmonized system, all SDSs are set up the same way. So fire fighting measures are always going to be in Section 5 of that SDS. Make sure to check and ensure that your SDSs are up to date for the chemicals that you're using. You should have one every 3 years or so, maybe sooner if something changes. They've identified something that needs to be revised on that SDS, they'll put out a new one. So you can usually find them online, or you can go to the person or business who sold you the product or the chemical, and they should have it available there. So we mentioned sections 359 through 374 of the regulations. I'm not going to go over every single one, but this is what they are. If there is anything that is going to be pertinent to the work that you're doing that you would like to look up, procedures for flammable substances is in section 363. Receptacles for material containing any flammable liquids, contaminated by flammable liquids is 364. Receptacles for combustible or flammable liquids is 365. Hazardous activities involving combustible or flammable liquids is 366. Control of ignition source, static charge, 367. Flammable liquids, gases, or explosive substances in vehicles, 368. Flammable or explosive substances in the atmosphere, 369. Hot work is covered under 370. Compressed and liquefied gas systems, 371. Oxygen, 372. Gas burning and welding equipment, 373. And piping will be under 374. We also have for explosives is going to be part 26, which is going to be immediately following this part. So it's going to start with regulations 375. If there's anything that you need to know, check out your Occupational Health and Safety Act and regulations in those sections. Again, the SCSA has an app out, SCSA Guide to OH&S Legislation. We don't have everything in there from legislation, but we are adding to it all the time. So there's lots of really good information in there as well. If you are having trouble, again, developing these procedures or you're feeling overwhelmed, call the SCSA and an advisor will get back to you for assistance. If you need help putting together a fire safety plan, call somebody at the SCSA. We will get back to you and we will assist you with that. So I want to thank you very much again for joining our Toolbox Tuesday. The SCSA is an industry-funded, membership-based nonprofit organization that provides cost-effective, accessible safety training and advice to employers and employees in the construction industry throughout Saskatchewan to reduce the human and financial losses associated with injuries. Thanks. See you next time.